Ayan, nagsimula na tayo dyan. Ayan na mga kameta. Kamusta kayo dyan? Yan, bago magsimula yung ano natin. Oh, by the way, thank you so much sa lahat ng mga well-wishers, mga tao na nagmamahal sa atin doon sa ating new project, among others. Obviously, kaya nga nagmeta tayo ngayon para ipakita natin na talaga tuloy-tuloy itong commitment po natin mga kameta dito sa ating mga vlogs. Kahit meron na tayong, thank God, salamat sa Diyos, may bago na naman tayong engagement dyan, particularly doon of course sa One News Signal TV. Ito yung parang ANC version ng wait lang, was I supposed to say? No, parang ito yung cable news version ng TV5 last time I checked. Anyway mga kameta, maraming salamat. Let me also of course say thank you sa GMA Network at ating mga kapuso for a very long time. For a very, very long time. We worked with Kapuso 6 years, I think, and I think that was the longest time I've worked with any particular employer. It was really a huge honor and privilege for me. So, talagang nagpapasalamat tayo dun sa mga naniwala sa atin, no? And all of the folks that we have that I've worked with throughout more than half a decade, no, with GMA Network. And of course, ito new chapter. Nag-ABS na tayo, nag-GMA na tayo ngayon naman doon sa kabila. Mga kapatid na, di ba? The same way naman din sa pagtuturo, no? So I did Ateneo, then LaSalle, and now of course I'm back to University of the Philippines, no? So alam mo naman tayo mga kameta, ang init talaga, no? Kaya ito ang nabili natin sa Vietnam. Init And so yeah, mga kameta, let me of course first of all say thank you so much talaga dun sa lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin. Obviously the pandemic time was really, really difficult because that meant a lot of transitions. Marami sa ating mga in-studio projects ay na-cancel. There was a lot of readjustments. But at least one thing that I'm very grateful about, mga kameta, is the opportunity to learn to do more online presentation and all that. Dahil doon, of course, papasalamat tayo sa mga kaibigan natin sa Stand for Truth, a program that I initially co-hosted with Atom Aurelio, and later on I remained as kind of an in-house analyst for them until the other month. So ito, nagpapasalamat tayo. Hindi naman tayo mga tipong tao na talon without any sense of gratitude. So again, thank you very much for that. Obviously, eto, plug-in natin ulit. So every Monday, 9:30 p.m., meron tayong mga set of premium interviews. They're 1 hour long, so they're long conversation. They're quite similar to podcasts natin, mga kameta. But the big difference is that, of course, this is cable television. This is quite serious, so you're not gonna have the makulit version that you get from me from podcast. Or from vlogs. You're gonna see the more serious side of me, the very side that perhaps some of you saw first before seeing the makulit side of me. So yung first guest po natin, and it will be showing later on in around 9:30. First guest po natin is from the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Isa sa mga pinaka sharpest mind, no, at patriots dyan sa Armed Forces of the Philippines. So please, yan, si Colonel Mike Lohico po. Yun yung first guest natin dyan sa program natin, The View from Manila. The idea behind The View from Manila, of course, was to provide a genuine Filipino or Asian or ASEAN perspective on global affairs. Alam natin na, unfortunately, pagdating sa international affairs, generally, you know, it tends to be dominated by the perspective of Western media. I have nothing against Western media. I've worked with them in so many ways. But I think it's mahalaga rin na magkaroon tayo ng unique voice on our own, no? So it's a big pleasure, no, to have my own shot at this, no? We know that many of our friends in the region, particularly Singaporeans and Indians, have been trying to do the same. Indians, I think, have had a number of a number of very good programs and analysts and pundits who have been capturing more and more imagination of the global South and the post-colonial people by providing a uniquely Indian point of view. We have friends also in Singapore doing that, in Malaysia, in Thailand, among others. So naisip ko siguro it's also time for us in the Philippines to do that. Nagpapasalamat tayo dun sa mga kaibigan natin, sa mga kapatid natin, no, sa TV5 One News for their vote of confidence in me, no. So gladly, maraming salamat sa Diyos, we had the opportunity to interview a lot of people, or arrange a lot of interviews with a lot of people. So please look forward to interviews with ambassadors, with top policymakers, admirals, ex-admirals, current admirals, top officials from this administration, from the MARCOS administration, from the previous administration. So we're gonna talk to a lot of people, and it's not gonna be a package 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 10 minutes. It's not just gonna be quotable quotes, but we're gonna look really deeply, no, into each issues. Now, obviously, the shows could tend to be long conversations sometimes, but there's also my input sometimes, and in some episodes you'll see more of my inputs rather than just interviews, no. But in the meantime, siguro I thought it's best na we showcase the best possible conversations we can have with top policymakers, premium hosts, and also people from across the ideological and political spectrum, no. So sinisigurado natin na iba't ibang boses ang maririnig dun sa show natin, no. I'm also very privileged to be joined by no less than Kathy Yang, who of course is very known to many of you as of course, once upon a time we were all in ANC, ABS-CBN together, right? So she's of course one of the best business journalists or anchors we have ever had, multi-awarded, no question about it. And then there's Robbie, and then there's Jano Gibbs, so so it's a lineup of 5 different shows, but parang pseudo flagship yung sa akin just chronologically because I came Monday. I think I was supposed to come. Anyway, so I'm really privileged to be part of that group. I take, you know me, I take my job seriously. I medyo minsan alaskador tayo, nagpapatawa tayo, etc. But deep inside, you cannot sustain what we have been doing unless you're really committed to it, no? Not only in terms of passion, but also in terms of deep convictions, no? So we deeply believe, mga kameta, dun sa ginagawa natin, which is fundamentally about not only raising the level of public discourse about the most important issues affecting us internally, externally, etc. Of course, dun sa podcast natin with Lelo, we look at Nexus, for instance, yung Project Pilipinas podcast ko with Mark Gamboa. We also look at, for instance, the latest Marites in Philippine politics. By the way, tuloy-tuloy lang yan. Yun naman with Mark Gamboa, we're looking at doing some more in studio also podcasts and all, and partnerships with like-minded friends. Tuloy-tuloy din yung podcast natin with Lele Claudio. Of course, we're trying to do our best, mga kameta. Thanks to your support, and of course, thanks to yung sense ng urgency that we feel in terms of really raising the level of discourse. But more than that, mga kameta, of course, we want to also provide an opportunity for people from across the political spectrum, whether for government, anti-government, indifferent to government, from literally different governments, no, for them to be able to share their points of view with the country. So please, in whatever capacity, if you have cable news, great, please watch it 9:30 every Monday. Otherwise, I hope the YouTube version or something like that will come out later on. But anyways, thank you very much for that. Alam niyo mga kameta, quiet lang ako. But while I'm quiet, I'm already doing a lot of negotiations of project here and there, no? So hindi lang tayo nagpapakyut tayo dito or ano. Init talaga today, no? Grabe, talaga nawiwindang ako sa init. Yeah. Okay. May fan kasi. I mean, so minsan quiet tayo, but actually we're working on a lot of things. Thank God some of them have worked. Some of them, I'm not sure if they have worked. I'm still waiting for updates on some of the other projects. Ang idea natin is, we believe that there is a kind of a market, there's kind of audience, there's kind of a interest in really in-depth, long conversations, and we're hoping to make the most out of it, especially as we head towards the next elections, as we deal with very difficult geopolitical issues. So yun, mga kameta. So thank you very much again dun sa mga supportan nyo. I'm exactly the same person, no? It's just that of course I have more commitments and all, but I'm doing my best. Kaya minsan makikita nyo na wala akong meta for one or 2 day, or kung late ako, it's because of the other commitments that I have also. So, but as much as I can, mga kameta, I'm doing my best to give as much as time as possible dito sa mga vlogs natin, especially when I feel something important has to be analyzed, has to be discussed. So the other day, di ba, 2 meta pang ginawa natin. Like, I don't know how I did it, but like, meta before interviews, then meta after, then writings, articles until gabi, no? So, grabe. But that's because naniniwala tayo sa ginagawa natin. At the same time, of course, mga kameta, we try to have more self-care. I make sure I go to gym as much as I can, take care of my diet, cut the carbs as much as possible to just like maximum rice once a day, or carbs once a day maximum. So we're trying our best, and also bring down sugar, pagdating sa coffee, etc. So we're trying to be as responsible as possible so that we can do what we're doing in the best way we can. So thank you so much, mga kameta, for your prayers, for your support. in whichever way, I really, really appreciate it. Now, having said that, mga kameta, balikan ko itong topic na minention ko the other day. Sa Saturday yan, di ba? I discussed this topic of a potential grand coalition, no? Na is in the works. Now, I have no confirmation that this is going to come into fruition, but the very fact that it's not something out of this world and it's not total marites just tells you about what an interesting historical juncture we find ourselves in, no? So how are we supposed to feel about it, no? So again, pag maalala nyo, there are discussions about GIBO being part of the cabinet, so a number of Arroyo people being in the cabinet, even Yap, for instance, the former agriculture secretary, potentially getting position of Marcos. There's also, again, no, so this was the case last year. There's, again, this is the case again now of Moros potential as the DTI secretary, no? So these are serious discussions out there. They're not confirmed. They're partly marites. But I don't think these discussions would have happened if not for what, if I'm not mistaken, also Trillanes, no? Senator Trillanes actually kind of, I think, also mentioned this dun sa interview with Christian Esquer or something like that, no? Something like realignment, no? I mean, this is what I've been using. I think the term is now being used over and over again. I'll actually use the term crossover, no? Or to put it nicely, dun sa libro about Abraham Lincoln's cabinet, I'm not saying BBM is Abraham Lincoln, but I'm just saying this is something, this is a kind of a template that has been used over and over again throughout the decades with varying degrees of success. No, of course, the original is Abraham Lincoln. No, this idea of a cabinet composed of people coming from different political factions, and the idea is that you want to build a broad political coalition. No, so there are three things that I want to mention here. So I already gave the caveats. Like, first of all, it's not confirmed. Second, I'm not sure even people like Moros are in a position to even join or are even interested in that. I have to talk to him personally to know about that. But I've heard from some very trusted people who used to work in Malacanang, etc., that, you know, he has been considered seriously, and some would even say that he also may have ideas about joining the cabinet. Now, so there are three things I want to discuss. First of all, of course, as I said, balikan natin itong kasaysayan na itong idea ng team of rivals. So let me show you the book para makita niyo sa galing idea. Now, what's fascinating is that the idea of team of rivals was also mentioned by someone that I'll mention very shortly, of course. So this is that fascinating book about Abraham Lincoln's supposed political genius. This book by Doris Kearns. So this has been kind of a template of politics or political discourse and punditry for quite some time. Like, do you want a cabinet of loyalists because you don't feel secure? Or do you want a cabinet of team of rivals because you feel secure enough, or you don't feel secure enough of just relying on a minority faction of super loyals, therefore you have to broaden your base? So there are different ways of approaching this, mga kameta. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, what's even more interesting is that one of the first persons to use or to deploy the team of rival template was MARCOS, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mamaya natin pag-usapan yung isa. Ito. Labas ko lang to. Sorry. Kailangan natin. Alam mo naman tayo, mga kameta. Ayan, ito. For me, it's extremely important. Extremely important. Ako, baka pag na-mention ko to, biglang magko-comment na naman si Direct. Si award-winning, super high-level Direct. Yan. So actually, the first person to mention it, as far as the Marcos cabinet is concerned, is actually Marcos, who actually suggested na yung brother niya will come up with something like the team of rivals. So back then, already we heard about the names. I think even the name of former Finance Secretary Purisima was actually mentioned as potential Finance Secretary. So this is not something new. But many things have changed, mga kameta, since last year. And that brings me really to the discussion today many things have changed because to begin with, up to like what? Close to half a dozen cabinet members were reshuffled over the past year. No. Now, I think some of them were really supposed to be, how should I put it nicely? They were supposed to be transitional. But some of them turned out very differently from how Marcos Jr. expected them to perform. I think Vic Rodriguez is one interesting case. But my sense is there's some other cabinet positions that were never, supposed to go to the people who first got it last year, and that Marcos had other people in mind. In fact, minention din ni Marcos Jr. na maraming natalo sa elections last year na karapat-dapat na pumasok sa kabineta niya dahil sa kanilang kakayahan. So, they may not have the popularity effect, so they didn't pull it off during elections, but they have the technocratic, bureaucratic, administrative skills and merits in order to be part of his cabinet. So, that tells you that, of half a dozen cabinet or semi-cabinet position levels that were reshuffled last year, it's very possible that a good number of them were not supposed to be permanent members of his cabinet to begin with, no? So, alam natin, of course, nawala na yung defense secretary, nawala yung national security advisor, nawala yung press secretary, nawala yung DSW secretary, nawala yung, of course, yung chief of staff, etc., executive secretary, marami nawala, no? Now, some of them, of course, because there was no confirmation. There was a problem with also getting confirmation from the legislature in the case of, for instance, Tulfo, Erwin Tulfo. Na-interview, by the way, natin last year, and you can find a copy of the interview doon sa ating podcast, mga kameta. Anyway, this is the other Purisima. Hindi ito yung Purisima na PNP chief. This is the finance secretary Purisima. Cesar, diba? Yung first name, yeah. Just to be clear. Okay. Now, 1 year on, I think these are the factors why I still take this idea of team of rivals seriously. The number one factor is this. Marcos Jr. turned out far more savvy and capable, I won't go as far as to say astute, but savvy and capable, than many people were willing to give him credit for. I think there were many people who were supposed allies to him, and there were many critics out there who never took him seriously, and they thought he's just going to be a kind of a figurehead, he's just going to be the kind of a symbolic leader of a broader coalition, and that he was going to end up playing second fiddle to more dominant figures. And we know who are these dominant figures you have in mind. So essentially he's going to be overwhelmed or pushed to the sidelines by the strong women who were supposed to be part of the ruling coalition, right? Clearly, that's not the case. We saw from the very first days on the choice on the defense secretary, dun sa choice niya sa Speaker of the House, even dun sa supposed backup niya for Senate President, boom! Clearly, he was showing who's the boss. Now, I'm not saying he's the epitome of super competence and success. I mean, we have serious problems we can talk about over the past year, and so actually, SW Service just came out and said that actually mas marami atang tao na were feeling, hungry, for instance. Food inflation is a serious problem, right? And many people would say that yung idea na ito ay dahil sa war in Ukraine, well, that may have made sense in first, second, or at most third quarter of last year, but not all the way into the second quarter of 2023. Now you're already talking about other issues, importation, smuggling issues, hoarding. So this is where you need leadership, political will, or executive action, and competent cabinet members, and of course, agriculture secretary. Now, nevertheless, if you look at it, Marcos Jr. managed to make readjustments without provoking full-fledged backlash from any of the major political forces, right? Una-una, nakita natin, he tweaked the war on drugs. He even criticized the war on drugs under his predecessor. But he always said it and did it in a way that did not provoke a full backlash or pushback. No, that's very, very important. More importantly, nakita natin yan sa EDCA on foreign policy, where super malayo yung approach ni Marcos Jr. Kaysa kay Tatay Digong. And yet, there are disagreements being said that. But for instance, Sara Duterte is not coming out all the way against EDCA. That's an important thing because Sara Duterte has her own constituency and base, and she's the vice president. She's number 2. Now, we can debate about what are the reasons there, but the fact of the matter is that the pushback or the backlash against the EDCA decision and the pivot to US decision of Marcos Jr. is nowhere close to significant, right? It could become significant down the road given certain conditions. I already discussed it in my writings, but so far that's the case. So, and then at the same time, Marcos was careful enough not to also provoke the previous administration or some of the officials by playing safe on the ICC issue, while also dangling the option or giving hopes or not shutting down hopes that Leila de Lima will no longer be behind bars based on what many would say nonsensical charges, right? I mean, come on, ilan years na wala pa rin ebidensya, walang matinong witnesses, diba? Nagwi-withdraw lahat ng witnesses right and left. Alam na natin naman talaga nangyari dyan, diba? So that shows you that the Marcos Jr. brand of conflict avoidance and change through moderation, right, kind of worked. And just look at his approval ratings, they're still high. Although I explained why his approval rating being high is not totally surprising by historical standards. I also discussed structural issues. Tinignan natin yung issue na in-explain ko na asymmetric accountability, democracy fatigue. In-explain natin lahat yan, pwede yung tignan yan. And the other thing, more importantly for Marcos Jr. is the international acceptance of him. No? Now, hindi masyado natuwang China siguro sa kanya, but much of the West, democratic West, is extremely chums with him and has welcomed him as a breath of fresh air. He was not even on state visit to Washington D.C. and to the White House, and yet nakuha siya ng full military honors nung bumisita siya sa Pentagon. So that tells you that. So change, but not too much change. And at the same time, of course, the ICC element gives him certain leverage that, of course, you can connect the dots. You guys are smart. But the second thing that we have to keep in mind. So first is, he turned out more capable in changing things without too much rocking the boat, at least in his first year. Now, by the way, this is not a moral judgment I'm making. This is a political analysis I'm making. My moral convictions, of course, are very clear. Dapat strong against corruption, strong against human rights violations. But I'm analyzing this from a political play game standpoint. The second thing here is, nakita din natin sa opposition na the opposition, I won't say melted away, but it looks like major figures in the opposition or in the Liberal Party or in even the pink camp, they seem to have respected the structural power of the bomb of unity in the honeymoon period. No, and in fairness, Marcos Jr. did not give any indications that he's moving towards his father or tatay style of authoritarianism or authoritarian populism. Now, I'm not saying everything's perfect and I'm just saying so far. So that has made a lot of people from the so-called opposition, case of Lenny and all, some would say, and a travel blogger, and then with others, quiet or case-to-case basis pushback lang. I can only think of Rizal Tiveros as a prominent opposition leader who has been almost consistently against all major policies of Marcos, right? RCEP, EDCA, I can go on and on, right? Or at least with caveats. But if you look at the other key figures, either like a travel blogger or some would even suggest, which is what brings us to level 3, which is even openness to join his cabinet. In fact, alam natin, many people providing business, economic advice to Marcos Jr., mga kameta, were already people who were in one way or another either supportive of or more intimately involved in the campaign for Lenny in the last elections. No, we're not going to name names, but you can connect the dots. So the idea of a Moro has joining his cabinet is not totally crazy, right? Not to mention, of course, the family ties, so on and so forth, Araneta, whatever. Okay, but I don't want to overplay that. Now, but if you look at with Marcos Jr., it's not like he's just bringing the so-called yellows and pinks. There are a lot of Arroyo figures also there. Not to mention Duterte-era generals, right? Look at our current defense secretary, national security advisors. Both of these generals and gentlemen were also in the Duterte cabinet, right? That's an important thing to keep in mind, no? So it's not like Marcos is just bringing in so-called yellow and pink or considering bringing them. He's also looking at people who come from the Arroyo of administration or keep a very strong relationship with former President Arroyo, who remains as a key figure, a linchpin of political establishment in the Philippines. And then there are also the Duterte-era generals, no, which I think gives Marcos a lot of confidence about his defense and foreign policy, and also about civil-military relations. So much so na now, in a serious sense, Marcos Jr. is talking about even pension reform, No, there is discussion of pension reform for the armed forces. So, when you put all of these three elements together, I think the very whiff of potential team of rival cabinet in the coming weeks and months, that just tells you how secure and stable Marcos feels, and I think to a certain degree that is not complacency but has some basis in reality. Again, this is so different from what many people were expecting. Now, this thing came out, not long ago, and it was like, eto daw yung maging kabinete niya, but there's absolutely no confirmation of that, and many would say this is fake news. For instance, I know for DOH is actually someone named Padilla who's being considered, not Robin Padilla, etc. No, so wala, fake news yan. And I doubt Harry Roque will be anymore in the contention for the spokesman position unless we're living in some interesting times again, given Harry Roque's very Tatay Digong position and EDCA and some of the key issues that are close to Marcos' heart or actually at the center of his policy agenda. So these are very, very interesting things that are happening dyan, mga kameta. What could the team of rival look like? What could be the breakdown? What could be the implications? Mahabang usapan yan, and I think that would be something that would be nice to talk to my guests, whether here, whether, and other platforms, and of course to also discuss with Lele Claudia in Nexus, to discuss with Mark Gamboa. I really look forward to discuss more about this, and I also like a lot of comments and suggestions that are coming out there. So in short, the ones who are super isolated nowadays are the ones who are either super pro-Tatay or super dilaw na totally ayaw kay Marcos because he's a Marcos, regardless of what he does, right? So yun yung mga pinaka-isolated. But essentially, everyone else is in the conversation nowadays. And that just tells you about how open, how fluid, how fascinating, and potentially even encouraging things could turn out. But of course, skeptical, and you could also say, eto na naman tayo, balimbingan, Pilipinas, wala talagang ano. Realignment is essentially just a fancy way of saying, joining the winners, no? I don't know. I mean, for me, the very fact that a lot of scenario predictions about the Marcos Jr. president in his first year pa lang did not come through big time. One would say, oh, Sara would be the dominant one. One would say, oh, Marcos will be a dictator. One would say, wala, opposition will go all out against him. None of them came true. And not to mention, yung mga henyo dyan nagsabi, oh, si Marcos pro-China yan, mga. None of that came true, at least so far. And I think there are many indications that what we see today, nowadays, over the past year, can actually persist for quite some time, precisely because of all of these interesting crossovers, realignments, and levels of political security and political capital that also Marcos Jr. is enjoying. All right, again, none of the thing I'm saying here is a kind of an endorsement or a moral judgment. I'm just analyzing it from a political game theory standpoint. All right? Okay. Maraming salamat mga kameta. Shoutout dyan kay Cho Gomez, kay Phil Maharlika, kay Carlos Fortunato. Ayun, thank you so much. Salamat din dito sa mga supporters natin dyan sa kabila. Kay Zoe Goko, kay Nida Chan, kay Lorenzo, kay Ma'am Eden Olonan. Thank you very much. Yeah. Ganito lang kasi sa there's a balimbingan that is just balimbingan, like business as usual balimbingan. And then there's a realignment and team of rival that could actually turn as potentially troubling situation into a moment of opportunity. I'm not saying we're there yet in that in the second scenario, but I think there is the chance for that if the good people play their cards well. This is a very difficult situation many people are finding themselves. I remember Leloy, our good friend, said something like, like parang for the critics of Marcos, they fear they fear his success as much as him becoming a dictator or something like that. No. And now I think a lot of people are finding themselves in a weird situation. No? Tayo naman mga kameta, I always made a difference. I mean, I really got this from Hemingway. No, there are different ways to write and in a way to think and to be. No? Which is, one is the moral you, which has a clear standpoint on what should happen, right, in a Kantian sense, categorical imperative. But there should be the analyst in you that describe things as they are, and then how things are aligning with each other, and almost the algorithm of the reality, political reality we're facing. So that's why I have I adopt different approaches when I want to approach when I look at the political landscape. No, and I think this is how we have to really approach, because if you really want to change the Philippines for better, you have to understand it and analyze it on its own terms and then push it towards a better outcome. Because if you approach Philippine politics through wishful thinking, and you try to pretend that Philippines is Norway or New Zealand, no, or you know what I'm saying, then wala talaga mangyari dyan. You're just setting yourself up for despondency, or your supporters for despondency, right? Okay, I'll keep it there. Diba, medyo, ano tayo, formal tayo and all of that. Ayaw kan mardugo or anything like that. Again, I appreciate very much again, yung mga suporta niya. Sorry, ang init kasi kaya I'm not as articulate as I'm supposed to be. Ayan. Ang init kaya. Yeah. Okay. No, anyway. Thank you so much again, mga kameta. I really appreciate it. Please continue to support us in whichever ways. Prayers, comments, suggestions, stars, whatever. We really appreciate that. And let me tell you that while we're doing all of these things, we will continue to, God willing, inshallah, to continue to also commit ourselves to the podcasts and other activities that we have been doing over the past year or so. Because I enjoy this, I appreciate it, I really enjoy and appreciate your inputs. Tinitignan ko yan, and that also helps me a lot to mau talaga yan, mau. Yan. Alright, thank you guys. Talk to you soon. God bless.